Thanks for tuning in to the Old Dirty Basement. On today's show, we're covering part 2 of Joey Miller with special guest Chief Darrell.
Yeah, many shout outs to Chief Darrell for, coming out, talking this through. I mean, this guy's got wisdom. This guy's got firsthand experience. I mean, that was very big and just amazing of him to join this show.
Yeah, he's from Solera Township, like we said, the police department there. It's a small police department we have here in Dauphin County, PA. He came in with his experience. We had questions for him that he was, quickly able to answer. And just to sit there and talk to somebody who has seen, like, these murderers or these people that commit crimes and make sure that they lock them up and we're safe here and where we live, and we thank them. Yeah,
the fact that this guy sat down and interrogated the guy that we're talking about was really cool that we were able to talk to him. Definitely like to have him back sometime. And he seemed to enjoy himself here. He's a great storyteller and talker and basically everything else. Like, it was just so awesome to sit back and listen. We'd like to do this more in the future for sure. We hope you enjoy this. And like I said, if you are, leave that 5-star rating, whether it be Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you're at. On Apple, you can leave us a written review. And sit back, relax, and enjoy part 2 of Joey Miller.
This is the Old Dirty Basement, home to debauchery, madness, murder, and mayhem. A terror-filled train ride deep into the depths of the devil's den.
With a little bit of humor,
history,
and copious consciousness.
I'm your announcer, Shallow Throat. Your hosts are Dave, Matt, and Zap. I love you, Matthew McConaughey. All right, all right, all right.
Hey, this is Dave,
Matt,
and Zap.
And welcome to the Old Dirty Basement,
where every week we cover a true crime,
murder,
or compelling story.
So sit back,
relax,
and comprehend.
Hello, 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 and welcome down to a special episode of Old Dirty Basement. I am Matt. With me always is Dave.
How's it going?
Zap.
Hey, man.
And we have the Chief here this afternoon.
Hello.
Yeah, Chief Darrell Ryder, special guest. So as you know, last week we covered the Joey Miller murders. Chief Darrell here was nice enough to come in and join us and give us a little info on that. So we're real excited.
Thanks so much for coming in, man.
Thank
We
you for
really
stopping.
appreciate it. Thanks.
You're very welcome.
Big supporters of our boys in blue. So
absolutely,
this is awesome.
Yeah. So Darrell was employed at Solera Township locally here. That's where we're at since March of '89. Correct?
That's correct.
Cool. So how'd you get into law enforcement? What would you say steered you in that direction?
Well, I don't have the typical story of wanting to be a police officer. I actually wanted to be a probation officer. And when I went to college, I took classes to be a probation officer. And my wife got pregnant while I was in college, and she said, "You need a job with benefits." So I came home one day to a clip in the newspaper that Solera was hiring, and I needed benefits because I had a child on the way. So I took the test, and here I am 34 years later.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That is cool. That is cool.
Yeah, congrats. What does a probation officer do as opposed to a regular police officer or a police chief?
Police officers are out on patrol. They're the first line of defense. They do everything. Whereas a probation officer, very important job as well, but they kind of deal with law enforcement on the back end, people that, have done their time and now are getting out and need to be supervised to make sure that they, re-enter the society in a healthy way. And so it's kind of different. We end up ironically hiring a lot of former probation officers that get into the field, and, we work very closely with them. And so they're similar fields. It's not like when I went to college, I went for, one thing and did a complete, 180.
So it's like criminal justice, probation officer, police cop.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So my college education was in a similar field, but I never really had a desire that I had to be a police officer. At the time, it was just a job to pay the bills, and I got into it and fell in love with it, obviously, because here I am so many years later still doing it. But
awesome. Thank you.
Cool. That's awesome. So you came in '89.
March 6, 1989.
Nice. So there's a lot of this, if not, most of this, conversation was spurred by the topic of Joey Miller. So you came on right when this guy was, in the midst of doing his dastardly deeds.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It wasn't very long after I started that the bodies started showing up, and it was kind of a unique experience for me as a young police officer to go through that and get to experience what it was like to deal with a large crime scene and something that had so much press coverage. And, at the time, though, it's interesting in my career that I got to experience that as a patrol officer. And then so many years later, when I ran our criminal investigation division, I got to experience it on the other end as a detective, and I got to actually make arrests on two of his remaining victims, the last two that he was arrested on.
Yeah. So if you go online and look up the Joey Miller video on YouTube, Chief Darrell is the one that took like the statements, correct?
That is true. I think Lieutenant Chateau was in the room with me, and then it was Joey.
Wow. He was the gentleman on your left, and then you were right in front of Joey, and then the guy.
I'm the bald head on the right, and Chateau is the bald head on the left.
It's fantastic.
I just see the one guy comes in, gives him some coffee, and I have some questions about the interview. Like
go ahead. No, shoot.
When you're interviewing somebody, I seen how you were ready. You read him, not really read him his Miranda rights, but told him, are you aware you're being interviewed? Are you aware that, or just you don't need a lawyer right now, or do you want a lawyer? Or did you ask him again, or was he like? It was I forget how you said it. Just like, are you something that he said he didn't need a lawyer, like he was fine, he's ready to say whatever he said.
Yeah, if that seemed like it was a little bit over the top, that was done for a reason why we kept reinforcing those questions, because the way this came about, and we'll have to go back to set up how this whole investigation came about. But originally when we talked to him, he denied doing these crimes, and we knew what he feared and what he was afraid of, and we had enough evidence against him that we were prosecuting him anyway. And he's, for him trying to, play like he doesn't understand the system, he understands the system. Mm-hmm. And he actually reached out to me and said that he was ready to talk. So, but prior to that, he said he didn't want to talk. So when somebody changes their mind and says they want to talk to you, you have to be really clear, because this could be litigated someday in court, that you have made sure that it's abundantly clear to everyone that's listening and watching that he's been given every out to not talk to you.
Okay, yeah, that's what I understood from that, because you were making sure, and you went over it again, and then over it again. You're like, are you aware? And like, he's like, yep, I'm ready to talk. Yep.
Have you been treated fairly?
Yes.
Have you been made any promises? Have you been threatened? Anything like that. Usually is something that you say anytime routinely for a serious investigation. And but we kind of were a little bit over the top with that there, because we wanted to make sure that it was abundantly clear, and he understood it as well, that he didn't have to talk to us that day, but he wanted to talk to us. Yeah, he wanted to. Yeah.
I said nothing came back to like bite you. Like, oh, shoot. Should have mentioned that.
Nah.
Right.
I did want to follow up with that, and that's a great segue when you said a couple of things that are really intriguing. One is that this guy knew the system, like he knew how this worked, and it just with my reading as little as I did about this guy. I mean, this guy was in and out of the system, from his formative years on. So he certainly knew what he was doing. He knew what was involved in the system. But with that in mind, initially he had, denied. In your opinion, what do you think caused him to flip? Like, what would be the impetus for him to say, you know what, I'm going to spill it. I want to tell you the whole story.
It's an interesting question. I think originally when you go back to the way this whole thing started, I don't think he intended to get caught. If you know the story of how we got on to Joey, it's really interesting. He was actively assaulting a female. He had her taped up and had beaten her and done all kind of things, and was taking a little time out to smoke a cigarette. And
This was the incident at the
Railroad.
Conrail. Yeah.
Conrail,
Railroad
and
track.
and fortuitously for this female, a Conrail officer, showed up.
Yep.
He runs and leaves his car. So, we have his, tag number. And I was working that night. I was working midnight shift at Swadera when this all went down.
That's
and
amazing.
They came out and said that they're looking for him. And we got with the Steelton officers and, pretty much surrounded the house because we figured he might try and come back to the house. And that's the story where he did get back into his house and then climbed up on the roof and, ended up holding us at bay for quite a while until he was talked down. Once that happened, the detectives that were working all these open cases at the time, started putting two and two together that, if he was doing this type of thing to this girl, he might be our guy for these other crimes that they were looking at. And in steps Tom Brennan, who, is a integral figure in this whole Joey Miller investigation. He was a retired Pennsylvania state trooper who ended up working for the FBI in their behavioral unit and profiling. And then he ran the Dauphin County Criminal Investigation Division. And Tom stepped in and, established a rapport with Joseph. And, actually he led us to the first bodies in Swadera Township in the landfill and, ended up confessing to those crimes. And I don't think that he intended to get caught. I just think he was going to try and run it out as long as he could. But once he was caught, I think he's always feared being put to death. That's my personal belief.
Sure.
And, he fought the death penalty. And during his first convictions for his first homicides, it was ruled by a judge that he was mentally not competent to be put to death.
Was that Turgeon? That
I don't remember. I'm not
I
sure.
think that's what I read.
But I always thought that that's what he feared. I don't know if you covered it on your last week's podcast, but interestingly enough, when they served a search warrant on his house after that whole incident, they found 7 statuettes on his nightstand. And these statuettes, we believed, and Tom Brennan believed, represented something. And it turns out they did, because that's the number of victims that we have.
I had like a shrine.
Yeah, he did. He had like a shrine.
That was something you brought up in the what is that? I can't think of
The
word.
interrogation.
The interrogation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and he admitted that it was, and our case, the last case that we had, was fascinating because it was a body that was discovered years after Joey was already in jail.
Yeah.
And that case haunted me because we solve most of our cases. We're a small township. We don't have that many murders, and fortunately, we have the time to work on our cases, and we've been very successful. This was one that Detective Chris Everett, who was initially assigned the case, it haunted him as well, that we tried so hard to figure out who this woman was. And when Detective Everett retired, he ended up handing the case over to me. And by that time now, I promoted up through the ranks, and now I'm a lieutenant, and I'm over criminal investigation, and started working the case. And there was a lot of good work by a couple of Harrisburg City detectives that opened up some old missing cases, and a great work by Lisa Pottinger from the Dauphin County DA's office, who, spearheaded the effort to take some of the remains and put them in for DNA. And through that whole process, we were able to get a name to our bones finally. And when that happened and we had a face and a name, a lot of the things started to really add up. I always kind of figured in the back of my mind, because of the vicinity where we found the bones, that it was probably one of Joey's cases, but it didn't exactly match because it wasn't, right exactly where he put the others, but it was close.
Yeah, he had his own little playground, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And this was just on the outskirts enough.
Right. But if you look like as a crow flies, it was very close in the grand scheme of things. And other things matched up about the information that we got back on this young lady who we finally identified. And when we were able to put that together, I knew that this was something that we had to try and, put together as a case, because it was an outstanding case.
So from the time you started in March of '89 to the time that he was on the rooftop, what year was that?
Rooftop was
Early 90s.
I was going to say 92,
91,
91, 92.
So this guy was not on the radar really at all with Sweater Township or
Well, he was, but it was, if you look at his record, to include his juvenile record, he was arrested many, many times for lots of different things, but nothing certainly this severe.
like murder and stuff. Okay.
No, it wasn't something that, we were looking at him as a murderer at that time.
I got you.
You referenced earlier that you said that you could tell he was afraid of death. Do you think the way he acted somewhat, do you think he kind of, I know he didn't make it very far in school. I know he wasn't what you would say an intelligent man. I didn't know if he had any street smarts that you guys could see that he kind of played down on the, I'm not very smart.
Used it to his advantage.
Yeah, try to use something like that to be like to avoid a death penalty.
Yeah, and I don't want to criticize the decision that was made by the judge, because, certainly I wasn't privy to all the reports that she received from the psychologist and everything. So, I'm sure that was an informed decision that was made at that time. Personally, just being a cop for as long as I've been, you always feel, I guess, a little bit suspicious that someone's trying to game the system.
That's what I mean, like a cop sense. Did you feel something that you kind of
I always thought
knew he was playing down?
Yeah, I always thought he was a little bit more savvy than he let on. And, it's funny when you listen back to some of the phone recordings that I have that I got from the prison when we decided to rattle his cage on this last homicide and go up and start asking him questions. We pulled phone calls that he made back to his daughter to talk about the fact that we had been up there, because we knew it would get him talking. And if you listen to the way he describes to his family, what's going on, it doesn't sound like the conversation of somebody who isn't competent, who doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. And, and to that point, this crime is a new crime that's being charged that I was investigating. And, until they say the death penalty's off the table, the death penalty's not off the table.
That's right.
And, I think that he believed that it was in his benefit to cooperate. And I believe it was in his benefit to cooperate. It helped us get closure for Kelly Ward is the name of the girl who bones were unidentified in the township. And
Was that the one they made like a config? They tried to configure the face.
Graham Hetrick had.
Yes.
I think it was
they did. That's
Okay,
Kelly.
okay.
And she didn't have that many relatives left. We were able to get a hold of some of the cousins and different people who helped us through the process and kind of gave us a background of what she was like as a person and what was going on in her life at the time and everything. And it was originally believed by the police in Harrisburg that when she disappeared that she did so on her own volition, just based on some things that were going on in her life. And I think that's what caused, and it probably causes a lot of missing person cases to go on not investigated for a while, is people do just decide to pick up and disappear if they're an adult. And I think the family thought that that's what had happened, and the police thought that as well. But they never, to give the credit to Harrisburg City PD and our PD, no one ever gave up. It took, DNA and the advent of new DNA technology to be able to get a name to the remains that we had. And the remains, when we got them, were found with, I believe there was a lead pipe, and the only thing that's just some small amounts of clothing and a watch.
And they mentioned the watch. I remember he would say he used like a tire iron for some things, for a murder, a pipe type object. I believe he said.
Mm-hmm.
But what struck me though is when you're talking about that and saying like how he may have been smarter than what he perceived. when he would talk about the murders just as something, I picked this girl up, this girl wasn't a prostitute. Oh, that one was. Yeah, she was a prostitute. And we got in an argument about money, and that's why I killed her. And he would just go on in conversation about that, which struck me as like, I don't know how this guy's, we don't know many murders. You don't get to do much work with people like that. But how this guy was wired was just insane to hear.
Yeah, I think he's evil.
You could see it.
I felt it in his presence. He's just the way he would coldly say that, listening to the phone calls as well, that, these girls were going to rob him, so he had to do this to, protect other people because these girls were going to rob him. Now, the truth of the matter is he knew, going out there that he was going to get what he wanted to get, and then he was going to kill them. And, he didn't intend to pay. And that was, but that's how we put the case together with Kelly Ward, because, once we identified her body, there wasn't a whole lot there at the scene, but that's where Tom Brennan came into it, because, myself and others believe that when we found out some things about Kelly's lifestyle and the way that she disappeared and her race, it just was too much of a coincidence that all that existed and it wasn't him, especially when you look at the time frame of when they said and how long the bones would have been out there. So, but to make a probable cause affidavit, to get a judge to sign a warrant for arrest is a complicated matter when it becomes what's called an MO case, or a modus operandi case. And I had a lot of help with Tom Brennan and his expertise in the FBI in, putting that probable cause affidavit together. And it was a long one. It was a long probable cause affidavit, but I was very satisfied with, at the end of it, that we did have enough probable cause to arrest him. And, it ended up being true, because he ended up confessing and giving us, details. So we were on the right track.
Did your job as well.
Yeah.
So could you take us back to that day on the rooftop? So you said you were there when all that went down. Like, do you remember that day pretty vividly? Like, sir?
Yeah, I do. I got assigned to watch run to the back of the house, and I ran to the back of the house, and he came out the back door, and he had a butter knife in his hand, and I told him to stop, and he threw the butter knife at me. I remember seeing it whiz past my head, and then, very quickly he hopped up on the roof, and he knew he was surrounded, and it was kind of anticlimactic after that. It was, we weren't going to approach him because he was sitting on the edge. Nobody wanted him to jump, and it was just sit and wait and talk. And then the experts at the time, that negotiators and that kind of thing, came up there, and they were able to eventually talk him down. But it shut down Steelton for quite a while, because it was right on Front Street, and he was hanging off the front of the house with his feet dangling over the edge. And I can remember the next day in the newspaper, back when you had newspapers, the picture of him sitting on the roof, and the story was quite interesting.
Yeah. So how long was the actual rooftop event? Like a few hours, or just like an hour? Or
Dave, that was 30 years ago. I know it was a long time.
It was a long time then. Okay.
It was through the remaining of the evening and into the day.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
then,
some reports have it at like 6 hours ish.
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a friend of mine, now retired Steelton police officer. We'll call him Officer Dave. He too was on site that day. He mentioned, so there's a couple of things just coming back, like quotes specifically, like this guy had said about this guy. So number one, earlier when you had said, you were talking about the again, what's done is done. The court system, the judge has made their decisions. This guy, now retired, Officer Dave, will be the first one to tell you that guy was not, mentally incapacitated, or whatever the appropriate word is that was deemed. He said that guy was smarter than you think, and he damn sure found a way to game that system. But what's done is done. But now back to the rooftop scene. So he was there that day. I guess two quick things. One, there was a canine unit there, and he had insisted, he was actually asking, please, can you please just sick the dogs on this guy? Can you just sick the dogs on this guy? And whoever was, operating the canine unit said, no, I'm not going to waste the dogs on this guy. No, these dogs are worth a hell of a lot more than this guy. I don't want to risk the dogs. And then another thing he had mentioned was, and this, circles back and harkens back to what you had mentioned about his fear of dying. So Officer Dave will attest there was no way that guy was going to jump. No way. This guy was a coward. He was killing women. No way was he going to kill himself. He just didn't have the fortitude. He was just a coward.
Yeah, I don't think that he wanted to jump either. I mean, he kept making statements that day. I'm just remembering, like, I know you guys want to shoot me. I know you want to hurt me. I know you want to do stuff like that. And, we're just reinforcing, no, we don't. We just want to get you down so we can talk, And I never thought he was going to jump either. I thought the whole thing was kind of like theater after a while because, he's sitting there and sun starts coming up and he sees everybody coming out. And, Steelton's a small town. People
Sure.
know him and everything. And I just think at that point, what did he have to lose? He had to know after he left his car at the scene of that incident that he was going away for a while.
Right.
And, he wanted to smoke his last couple cigarettes and get the most out of it.
Yeah, he's not that stupid.
Yeah, if he wanted to jump, he could have jumped early on in that affair. But I'm glad he didn't because, as a result, we were able then to finally get some closure for, some crimes that we had that were open. And I'm glad that the Ward family was able to get that.
Yeah, sure. I just one quick follow up. So, and I'm not trying to dominate. I just want to. This is just so fascinating, really.
Yeah.
So that day, again, certainly Swidera was there, Steelton was there. With this guy reaching far and wide to commit these murders, or at least to to gather or collect these women that he ended up killing. In the end, and you mentioned Harrisburg earlier, so how many different police departments were involved with, finally, getting this guy, caught behind bars? I mean, you name it.
You nailed it right on the head. I mean, it was a collaborative effort. Harrisburg City for certain, Swidera Township, Steelton, Pennsylvania State Police, Dauphin County CID. I'm sure I'm probably missing some. The Conrail Police,
Yeah.
Susquehanna Township Police. The larger agencies in Dauphin County had some part of this investigation. Several of the bodies that he ended up being charged with were Upper County victims that the state police ended up making arrests on.
Is that the Perry County, I guess?
Yeah.
Duncannon.
Yeah, Duncannon.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And then he had actually assaulted a girl up there that ended up living that he left for dead, and she ended up pulling through. She's one lucky girl.
Yeah.
And then there's a period of time that he disappeared down south into the Carolinas.
Yep.
And, that was during the time that he was active. And,
All of a sudden, bodies are going missing down there too. That's another thing that Officer Dave has alleged that was never proven. And I mean, certainly everybody in every family that's lost anybody, has anyone gone missing, certainly wants closure. But he had made that same assertion that this guy would summer down in Virginia or the Carolinas, you name it. And interestingly enough, while he was down there, a handful of people went missing while he was there.
Yeah, we've been in touch with agencies down there, and they're well aware of him. The problem with some of the victims that Joey would pick out was they were transient or they didn't have a lot of family. And unfortunately, some people will remain missing or will never be identified. I've always felt that he had more because he spent so much time down south. I also think that he's afraid to talk about that because, he believes in his mind that, up here in Pennsylvania, I think he's got himself convinced that they're not going to put him to death. But if he talks about doing a crime down south, I think he's fearful that,
Sure.
he could get the death penalty.
Yeah.
But, I was glad that he talked to us. It, like I said, helped us get closure, and, it was the right thing to do.
Just really curious now. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I can't help it. When you mentioned that, again, we were talking that he had basically, flipped, like he was silent from the beginning, but then he just open book and he was telling you as much as he can. Now, so certainly I'm no attorney, as I'm no scientist. Does that sort of cooperation with law enforcement, does that sort of cooperation alleviate the potential for a death penalty? It's like, look, I get it. Look, I murdered these people. I'm admitting it. I'm telling you that. In exchange for that, could you, kindly push aside the potential for death penalty?
I don't think you can say that because, if you listen to our disclaimer over and over again,
Sure.
we were clear that the fact that you're telling us this is not going to save you
Great.
from any kind of penalty phase.
There we go.
So, that's a decision that gets made by, a jury.
Sure.
And I don't think that's something you could ever promise somebody.
Yeah, he wasn't looking to lawyer up. He
Right.
did not mention that at all.
Yeah, this whole thing is fascinating to me. I love the law. I love it just dearly, in and out. I love our justice system. So again, just the more I learn by asking questions like this, the better. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, this is
to circle back around to that, though, that being said, once again, to the point where I said that I think that he's not stupid, is he's also got to understand, too, that part of that penalty phase is going to be everything and every part of that investigation. And if he can stand in front of a jury or have his lawyer, argue for the jury that, listen, he was compassionate, he saved the family a trial, he saved, us from having to put him to trial, I think in his mind he felt that it did help him, And by that time, he knew, for him to reach out to call us, he knew that we had him. What had ended up happening is when he got charged, he gets served with that paperwork, the probable cause affidavit. And of course he's saying, no, 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 no. Well, in the interim, he sat down and he read the probable cause affidavit. After he read the probable cause affidavit, he knew that we had a solid case against him. And that's when he decided that he wanted to talk.
I got a question for you, Darrell. So that area where he was dumping the bodies at, currently there's townhouses up there, and there's is it like a county, not county, but a township dump site for?
It used to be.
It used to be.
Yeah.
So at that time when he was doing that, was it that same kind of dump then, or was it just kind of woods, or what was the area?
By the time we started finding the body, I don't think they were dumping down there anymore, but it was heavily wooded area. Mm-hmm. And it was actually a pretty difficult crime scene to work because of all the vegetation. And I remember, being a young patrol officer, my job is I got assigned to, they wouldn't allow the press past a certain point. And I sat there in a police car, all day long, just making sure nobody came past the line.
Wow.
But every once in a while I'd get to go in and help them with the search and help them do things. And it was several days that they were there down in the landfill. It was run by Ron Fernsler, who was our evidence guy at Swedera, and he's since retired, but he was well known in his field for his work doing evidence.
That's awesome. That's right. That scene was right up by the water towers, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Kind of.
Ish. Close enough.
Yeah, it was not too far away from the water towers.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you go down the hill on Kelker, nobody will know who Dave is, but Dave that used to own Santos.
The guy that I worked for, that's where I first heard about this when I was working for him, because it was literally like
right
at the edge of his property. Like if you drive down past his house, he was telling me about this.
Was that D?
Yeah, D.
D. Okay.
In the mid 90s. And I'm like, what? There was a serial killer in Steel? No, I knew nothing about it. And he was like, yeah, where the townhouses are down past there, they found bodies and stuff. I knew nothing of it. So
it's wild.
I was just curious at the time he was active, if that area was, I guess it wasn't heavily trafficked back there. It was
no. And as it started getting developed, this is an interesting story, Joey would go back and visit his crime scenes after, he'd kill a girl, and he'd like to masturbate and scatter the bones around. It excited him to go back and revisit the sites.
wow.
And as a result of him throwing the bones, it made for the scene to be a little bit more difficult. And one of his victims, we never did find the right femur of this victim. So fast forward to the year, I think it was 2017, I'm working and I get called down to the landfill, and now it's houses and different things down there. They had found a human femur bone. And I was like, oh,
Jesus.
No.
Oh, wow.
I'm hoping this isn't a new case. And we get down there, and I saw how old it was. And just being on the job long enough, I said, that's the missing femur. And everybody, the young cops are looking at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm telling you, this is the missing femur from one of the victims that we had down there. And the coroner, Graham Hetrick, still had pictures of the skeletons, and we were able to positively identify the femur as the missing femur from one of our original, many years later.
That's crazy.
So
2017.
I didn't read about any of that stuff. That's interesting enough that we talk about a lot of stuff here. We call it the McDahmer triad. I don't even know if
it's called the McDonald. The real name's the McDonald triad.
The McDonald triad, and I'm sure you're familiar with the triad of. It's something that this guy came up saying some of the traits of a serial killer, and one like arson. There was like physical or sexual abuse growing up. There was
like bedwetting.
Bedwetting was one of them.
Abuse of small animals.
Yeah, abusing small animals. You're on it. From reading about Miller when he was growing up, I know he was abused. I think they said physically, sexually. I don't think the mom was around very much. The dad already had his own trouble with the law. Is this something you see in a lot of people that you bring in from your 30 plus years of experience? Do you see it? Not that they're all serial killers, but like from families that are abusive, drugs, stuff like that. Is that a...
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
okay.
You take for granted the good upbringing that you had as a child. I remember like a life-changing moment for me as a police officer. We had a guy that was burglarizing garages, and it was driving us crazy. He was hitting us left and right. So a partner of mine and we just decided one night we were going to start following each other around because we figured he was watching us because we were checking businesses like crazy, and we couldn't believe if we didn't catch this guy. So I followed behind my partner, like 15 minutes behind him, and we had written down all the garages we were going to check, and I pull into this one garage and the window's smashed out. So I got on the radio and I said, "Get back here, he's got to be here," because he had just checked it. So sure enough, we surround the garage and we catch this young kid. He turned out to be a 16-year-old kid. And, I'm a young cop and I'm like full of adrenaline. We got you. You drove us crazy, and I got him back at the station and I'm talking to this kid. And at the time, my wife and I were getting ready to go to Disney World, and I'm sitting there and my wife calls me on the phone and I'm talking to her about going on vacation. I looked and this kid was crying, and I said to him, "What's wrong with you?" And he goes, "I don't know." And I just asked him, I said, "Have you ever been on vacation?" He had never left Harrisburg.
Oh, wow.
He's a 16-year-old kid who, I was mad at because he was driving us crazy and doing these burglaries. And yet I grew up and, every summer my parents took me to the beach. They took me on vacation. I went to church, and I think I had a good base.
Sure, that's a nuclear family, a wholesome upbringing. That's the way it goes.
And I reminded myself from that day on, and fortunately for me, that happened early on in my career, that, before you get too judgy, understand that everybody's got a story. And I'm not saying it's an excuse, but it is an explanation when you see behavior that you can't understand, that in your mind you would never want to do it. But somebody else's mind that they weren't raised the way you are doesn't seem as abnormal to them. Now, in Joey's case, he checked about every box on the ticket.
Right.
Now, there's an infamous story of him abusing a puppy that's too graphic for me to talk about on here. But, it was the animal abuse. It was alleged there was something between him and a family member in the sexual abuse realm. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm not saying he had it easy growing up. Certainly doesn't excuse, killing human beings. But if you're looking for, an explanation as to why he may have had issues, maybe that's why.
Yeah, that was the second part of my question, but pretty much answered it. Is that how, or maybe why the judge maybe granted some leniency, is looking into his past and what he grew up with, and maybe saying, this kid maybe really isn't all there. Mm-hmm. Even though he knew enough to get married, to have a family, right, have a job. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think everything was wired correctly.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's why I didn't want to comment on that so much, because our judges do a great job.
Yes, yes, they do.
For sure.
And
for sure.
They don't take decisions like that lightly. So, they have to be cognizant of the fact that there's a bunch of family members of the victims, and for them to make a decision like that, I'm sure it was an educated decision. Yeah. So I just know it's frustrating to think that somebody would be gaming the system, but I'm not saying that happened. It just was a feeling that I had that he was a little bit more intelligent than he let on.
And my grandparents are from Steelton. I remember growing up as a kid, my grandmother always said to me when I would like say or be judgy somewhat. I remember as a kid, and she'd be like, "Everybody got their shit, Matt." I really was like, "What the hell is she talking about?" Until I got older, and I use that with my kids today. I was like, "Relax, like everybody got their shit. Calm down."
Everybody's not the same. You're right. So you mentioned earlier about like the township. So it's not. So that was a question I actually had. Like, how common is it to actually find bodies like that, like skeletons? But that was a rare occurrence then. So you did answer that earlier, but that's one of the questions I had. And my next question was to follow up with that, like with technology changing and getting better. I mean, I'm sure it helps your job, but does it hinder the job as for the police as far as like, you know, DNA, like you were saying, progressing and getting better, but does it have its downsides, I guess, for criminals? And
I don't think so. I think it's very hard to be a criminal in today's day and age with the surveillance video that exists, people with ring cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Cell phone technology, and DNA technology.
Mm-hmm.
It would be very hard to be a criminal. You'd have to be pretty slick to get away with something on a large scale, because we have detectives that I would not want looking for me if they were looking for you for a crime, that are really well trained in cell phone technology and all kind of things like that. So the body cams, as it now, I'm a chief of police, have been one of the greatest things in law enforcement. It used to be that if somebody called up and said, you know, the officer talked rude to me on a traffic stop, it was he said, she said, you talked to the officer. I didn't. Well, they said you did. Now it's, you know, captured on the MVR camera and the cruiser, and it's captured on the body cam. And, you know, 99 times out of 100, it shows we're doing the job the right way, and it makes my job a lot easier as a manager. There's also accountability to it. Officers know that they're being recorded, so, you know, they're going to mind their P's and Q's and make sure that they're doing the right thing. And I think that's a great thing. You know, I've been a cop for a long time. I was a cop before Rodney King, and when Rodney King happened, it was a horrible thing. We learned our lessons and we got better. And, you know, we were, you know, heroes. Then Rodney King happened and we were zeros. Then 9/11 happened and we were heroes again. And then Ferguson happened and we were zeros again. And, you know, we just start climbing back out and learning from our mistakes and trying to get better. And then that horrible thing happened with George Floyd. And, you know, that officer, you know, did not behave in the correct way. And, you know, anytime something like that happens, a department like ours, who's accredited, who tries to do the right thing, it makes it hard on everybody, and nobody wants a bad cop. You know, somebody thousands of miles away not doing the job the correct way makes us suffer. And it's frustrating.
Well, one thing I'll say about Sweater Township, they do a great job. I know you guys do like, it was like Coffee with a Cop or something like that. You do the youth program that both my kids have been through. It's like basically police camp, and you know, youth in the township. Like, it's just the township that kids that can go, but they're invited to go through like a week-long class, and it's really good, I think, to go and, you know, for kids and to learn things like that. And I think they do a good job, definitely in Sweater Township with that. But I would hope do you see that at like other departments? Is that like the norm pretty much? Or?
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment with Sweater Township. We're very proud of our community service program. We have a Corporal Brandon Pokrap who runs our community service program, supported by all the elected officials, and they allow us to spend the time and money to invest in a relationship with the community. The hope is that you invest in that relationship and never have to cash the check, but that if it ever does happen, because we're human beings, and you know, one of our officers would make a mistake or do something that catches the news, that they give us a chance to get it right. We're very proud in what we do. We do police ourselves, and but we also want to keep that transparency, you know, open with the community. There are these things called the pillars of procedural justice. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but if you get a chance, look up the pillars of procedural justice. It was actually something that came out through the Department of Justice back during the Obama era. And it basically says what I believe in is it's kind of like the golden rule. You treat people the way that you would want to be treated. You're open, you're transparent, you're fair, and you're just. I'm oversimplifying those rules, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. And we teach that to all our officers, de-escalation, trying to talk to people the right way, try to avoid use of force incidents. Now, understand, I'm also a big believer in, there are men and women that do this job that from time to time you have to use force. You get put in, the position that you have to do it. We're trained to do it, that you try and do it with, that no one gets hurt. But let's be honest, we're facing some really evil people and some really bad problems as a society, and it's a hard job. As a result of that, when I tested at Swedera back in 1988 is when I actually took the test, there were hundreds of people applying for the job. This last time around, we ended up after the written test with 36 people. And, that's what scares me for our profession right now is the lack of interest because of, some of the things that get believed on the media. I blame it on. The fact that nobody wants to come out here and, be in headline news. But for those that are still willing to put themselves through that, to do it, who have that calling, I have the utmost respect for them. And don't think that it's, all grim and that we don't have people because, we're getting ready to offer a couple young people some jobs here this next week, and they're good candidates.
Right.
It's just, it's harder to find people that are interested. We actually had to do some pretty serious advertising and.
Yeah, there was billboards up. And growing up, you would never see billboards for, become a police officer, Harrisburg, Swedera, which, that's insane.
Yeah.
Actually, that's exactly how I remember it growing up too. I remember hearing like the older kids or the much older kids that so badly they wanted to be a police officer.
Police officer, fireman.
But Christ, there was the pool that was going in and applying for these jobs was just so vast, absolutely so vast that Christ, I got a 1 out of 100 and some chance of getting it, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to give it a shot. Yeah, it really is amazing now to hear that. Conversely, these many years later, there's now the need to advertise and to do it versus that what you would think is like you would say that natural calling, like that drive. There's just that fire in your gut that you just want to do right. You know what I mean? Serve your community and serve the populace
But like the chief said, it's also media based. I think like what you were just saying, like you guys are trying to do your job, yet you have one guy that screws up and then it's all over the news on every channel.
The 24-hour news cycle does not help.
Yes. No. And then it's something that where you just want to try to do your job. And you guys, like you said, are people. So you make one bad mistake and they try to put everybody out there as you're all in one group together where it was one person's mistake. And I think that's why it's so hard now for some people to be like, well, do I really want to go through that? Do I really want to do that?
Right.
And that's where, to be a police officer is a tough job.
It's not an easy job to begin with, let alone all that extra stuff.
But not even that, like a routine stop at night because you don't see people's hands. You see because my cousin's a police officer, but he's like, you don't like you're pulling somebody over 12:30, 1 o'clock. Then you're figuring, they might, but you don't have to figure that because you got to stay neutral. But then you see them start reaching around, and then you're just like, hey, just keep your hands up for a minute, license ready. But they want to see where you're going. Like you just start. It makes the cops nervous too. You start moving your hands all over the place. It's dark in your car. Tinted windows are another thing that like they're like, what the heck? Like I can't even see in there.
You don't know what you're walking up on. Yeah.
I know I'm talking on a social media platform here, so I'm not bashing all social media. I have an iPhone and I listen to things and I watch things too, but it feels sometimes a little unfair. I'll be sitting at home and I'll have a text message sent to me with a picture of an incident going on in the township, and it'll be like, what's going on in the township? And before I even get a chance to get notified by my admin staff or my supervisors, it's already out on Facebook. It's already out on a local, social media site. And, our elected officials, they pay attention to that type of thing. And it really makes you as an administrator have to be hyper vigilant to make sure that you're staying ahead of what's going on. And it makes me, long for the days when, information wasn't always as easily accessible, because sometimes it doesn't feel to me like I can get ahead of anything before I can get my head wrapped around on what actually happened. And that's just, I think, a message that I want to give to everybody is, make sure that you're being patient with your police department, because, a lot of these situations that we get into, especially the more serious ones, can be very complicated, and you want to be polite to the victims that are involved and the families that are involved. I know that everybody wants information instantaneously, but we have to be cognizant of all kind of things. We have to be cognizant we don't put something out there that tips off the bad guy that did the crime, so we can catch them. And there's so many different factors. So if you don't, get the answer that you want right away, and, so quickly, I guarantee you there's a reason why you're not getting it right away. We have no reason to try and hide any information unless it's for one of the reasons, like I said, so we can, make sure that everything's being handled correctly. Just a point I wanted to make.
It's not always a conspiracy or something else.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's what people want to jump to right away.
This trial by media is ridiculous. Within minutes, within seconds, people have already determined, and it's not unlike the chief has said. All they get is a clip, and I mean it's 5 seconds. You've missed the entire story. All you're getting is those 5 seconds of a video. Well, this is the terrible thing that's happened. This is the only thing you should focus your attention on. No, it's awful. It's just awful.
But that's what people get upset with cops. They think a cop says you're getting a speeding ticket, and oh my gosh, I was just trying to go visit, take the kids to my grandma's for the holiday. They're mad because the cop. I got a constable showed up at my door. I owe $300 for parking tickets that I threw out. But these are just like regular day-to-day stuff that happens with people in normal life. These cops are the ones that are keeping people like Joey Miller off the street.
Yeah.
And preventing more murders, putting people in jail that need to be there.
So I have another question talking about media, like to switch gears a little bit, but so do you watch movies and like call out bullshit when you're watching cop movies in a way, like, because I mean, obviously you lived it, you've been in it and stuff. Do you ever watch movies and go, well, that one happened, that's not right? Like, do you, or another question would be, have you ever seen a movie that was like, man, that's pretty accurate, like that, like when it comes to police work and detective work?
Were you talking to my wife?
No, no. Why'd she say that to you?
She can't stand watching any movie with me whatsoever, because I call foul and bullshit on 99% of what I see on TV. Like, you don't walk around with your finger in the trigger guard. You don't, have evidence guys that are doing interrogations. I could go on and on and on about, I say to my wife all the time, why didn't they just offer a seasoned police officer $500 to look over this and say, hey, tell me what's realistic and what's not. And there are some that do better job than others. Hands down, the best law enforcement show on TV for realism is The First 48.
Okay.
And it's fact based. It's like a documentary, and you don't get the Hollywood in there. That's what a real case looks like.
Okay.
So Beverly Hills Cop is not what you go to.
It's not accurate.
Okay.
No.
That's good to know. Yeah, because we asked, we have a listener, Officer Vince. Shout out to Officer Vince, another cop friend of ours. That we asked him in Beverly Hills Cop. There was a scene where they had to take him to the county line. They're like, get him out of here, take him to the county line. So we asked him. Now, Officer Vince is out in like a rural area,
Pittsburgh area.
Yeah, it was like above Pittsburgh, and we were like, hey, is that true? Did you ever have to do that? He said, oh, I think didn't he say once maybe a judge told him that?
Yeah, the judge said that they had to.
Something
outside
like
of the but that wasn't the cop, it was the
Yeah,
judge.
the question I think was actually, is it within the ability of law enforcement to actually
chase somebody over,
get to
that's what it was.
remove someone from a territorial line? So as let's say Swedera Township, the question would be simply, Chief, do you or does some member of law enforcement or a judge have the ability to basically excommunicate somebody the hell out of Swedera Township?
No, that's Hollywood. No.
That's Hollywood.
That doesn't make sense.
or if there was like a police chase, like if you were going into Harrisburg, you're like, oh, we're done. You got to pull off.
No, no. I will tell you there are policies that are different from agency to agency, and if you're in a fresh pursuit with somebody and you go into another agency, you need to be cognizant of their rules within that agency, and we try our best to we have a Dauphin County Chiefs of Police Association where all the chiefs meet together, and we try and make sure that we're all on the same page so that we're working with each other and not against each other. And I think we do a good job of that in Dauphin County. I was a former president of that organization. It's now Chief Hess from Hummelstown PD is president of our Dauphin County Chiefs, and they do a great job.
Cool.
So I mean, we've done. I feel ashamed almost going back on the topic of Joey Miller at this time.
No, that's fine.
I mean, no, just because like hearing Chief talk about this, and by this I mean law enforcement as a whole and everything that we had just, talked about for the last 10, 15 minutes. Like, how do you follow that up? How do you go back to a stupid topic like some guy that's rotten in jail?
But still, yeah.
I mean, it was just such it's like a climactic ending that you just nailed. And I don't know, I'd be ashamed to ask the question. I'm
just
done.
ask it. Just ask it.
I think
edit
he's
it.
building up now. This is
No,
that's
so
part
it's
of
not
the
even
game.
that. It's just, so much of this can get cut, and that's fine, really.
It can be here.
Yeah,
It's
go
just
ahead.
a conversation.
So where this guy had his little playground was a dump site, was a woodsy area that has since been built into townhouses, et cetera, et cetera. During the construction of those townhouses, were there at any point other remains that were found that this looks like a Joey Miller, it smells like a Joey Miller, but we're just not close enough to be able to nail this one to Joey Miller? Like, it doesn't quite have his panache. It's there. I mean, there's bones here, like we found, or a body, but it's and it might be in his playground or it's in his sandbox, but it's not necessarily his. Like,
No.
You remember that happening?
No, there were remains that were found periodically from time to time, but they were always attributed to one of the missing bones from the victims that we had.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't that we're aware of have any unidentified bodies that we're investigating at this time.
Thank you. Thank you for putting so succinctly what took me like 2 minutes to blurb out. Yeah, thank you. That's exactly was the question.
No problem.
Chief Darrell here. I've known him for years because working at the pizza shop. So I had a little fun question for him. So who has the best subs in the area now that the crew I work with, now that we're done making subs? Where's Chief Darrell go to get a good sub?
100% Boulevard Pizza on Eisenhower Boulevard.
Oh,
there it is.
Boulevard
There it is.
Pizza.
Interesting.
For the sub?
Carlos makes a Boulevard sub, and
I'm writing this down.
They use Schmidt's bacon from
Oh,
across
from
the
across the
street.
street?
Yeah, and they have the best stromboli you've ever tasted in your life, and hands down, Boulevard Pizza.
Now, this has nothing to do with the fact that Swidera Township's administrative offices, the police station, i.e., is but a mile and change down the road.
Nope.
Okay.
Nothing to do with that. I wouldn't lie to you.
Okay, fair enough.
Look, I got a little bit of a belly. You can tell.
Yeah, we all do.
We all do.
Yeah.
That. It's all right.
We enjoy a good sub.
All right. Well,
sure.
big
good
shout
slice.
out to Boulevard Pizza on Eisenhower Boulevard.
Do you know they opened to Mother's again?
Mother subs?
Yeah.
I think
Off
they
of
moved further
22
down.
or something like that, I think.
Well, there was one there at the old Exxon. And
Yeah, where the old Exxon was.
Yeah.
They made a decent sub.
Yeah.
They weren't bad. Yeah, they
they
weren't
were good.
bad.
And then Fleming Sub Base when it was off of 19th. But the one here, still very good.
Dairy Street.
Off in Dairy Street.
The one at Swidera Square was at Jersey Mike's.
Oh, Jersey Mike's.
Yeah, that's a solid sub too.
Yeah,
Oh,
Jersey Mike's is good.
makes a good sub for sure. Yeah, but we at Santos, Chief Darrell used to come in there. We used to whip up some subs and pizza and stuff like that. I didn't really think our subs were that great, but they
You
were
guys had a good
decent.
cheesesteak.
Yeah, they were decent. They were
You had a good
decent.
cheesesteak.
I think our subs better than our pizza. I think
Yeah, you had homemade rolls.
homemade roll.
there.
The rolls were great. The rolls
Oh,
were
was that
really
it?
good.
The rolls.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Hoagie's got a great sub. I don't know if anybody's been there. They
So,
have
yeah, Hoagie's, they have locations in Hummelstown and Lemoyne.
yes, Lemoyne.
Consistent menu across the board, just two different locations. Fantastic subs. And while they don't make their own bread, it's subbed out to sub. They're
It's an Italian-y.
Subbed
it's an
out?
Italian.
it's
an
subbed
Italian
out.
sub
Somebody
bread.
they have
It's
another.
good.
There is a purveyor who makes their rolls for them. Dynamite sub. Don't sleep on that. Make your way to Hoagie's. I'm not saying it is in any way, shape, or form in competition at all with Boulevard Pizza relative to the product that Boulevard puts out. Just saying, Hoagie's, good subs.
So is Boulevard Pizza the one next to the beer distributor?
It's right next
Bresky's.
to
Okay.
Bresky's.
I know where
Bresky's,
you're
yeah.
at.
Is
Yep.
that, and that RJ subs?
That's up further.
That's up
Okay.
further. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I haven't eaten there, but I definitely want to check it out.
I think he spends a little bit more money on his ingredients, and you can taste it.
It shows.
Oh, see, I like
It's
that.
worth it.
That's where we talk about the cheese. What's that called?
The grande.
The grande.
Now,
The
we were
grande
not a
cheese.
grande cheese at Santa's. We were not 100%er.
You
That
were
cost
80%.
He used some other cheese, Lucille, I think it was, or something
What?
like that. It was it was
Cisco?
okay
Is
cheese.
that a Cisco brand?
It might have been.
Brand
I don't know.
X.
But
Schmidt's bacon could probably make anything taste
Oh,
good.
Schmidt-
Schmidt's
did you ever
sauce.
have the
That's fair.
Schmidt,
Oh,
the
that's
Schmidt's
fair.
roast beef? You ever have their roast beef?
I haven't. I guess now on Fridays they grill out. And
Yeah, they have.
Yes.
You get the.
a foot long sandwich with sauerkraut on it. Is, oh my god,
It's tough to
Good.
beat.
Yeah.
It's good, huh?
It's tough to beat.
You used to go there. It used to be off of Moon Street on Cottage Hill there.
Yep.
Oh, that's where Smitty
yep.
was?
Smitty's.
You are old school.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember the old shop. Absolutely.
you would
it
remember
was.
that,
I mean,
too.
it was somebody's house, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, it was a house.
Yeah.
You're like, what the hell is this doing here?
Yeah, it was in the basement of the house.
But my grandma and I
Jurek
used to walk
family.
there on Fridays, I think in the summer.
Okay.
And then we stop at Turkey Hill.
Gotcha. So did you grow up? You grew up in E-Town? As I saw you worked at the Masonic homes before.
Yeah, I grew up in Elizabethtown.
Okay,
Okay.
nice,
Yeah.
nice.
That answered my follow-up question.
Yeah,
Okay,
cool.
I have a funny story about that.
No, go for it.
yeah, dish it.
It was like my first couple of weeks as a SWAT air officer, and I was being trained by a veteran officer, and he didn't want me in his car. It was back during the day that rookies are annoying, and they still are to some extent, but you got to train them. So I'm sitting in his car, and we were running speed on Derry Street, and he kept showing me these citations. He goes, "Here, look at these," and I'm looking through them, and I noticed that a couple of the people that he cited were from Elizabethtown, and I just said it out loud. I said, look, you're getting all these people from E-Town, and he goes, "You're going to find out in this job that you're going to meet a lot of jerks, and most of them are from Elizabethtown."
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's silent for a while, and I don't say anything, and then he goes, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Elizabethtown." And then he just laughed. He goes, "Proves my point."
Proves my point.
Nice.
And then he and I became really good friends, and I ended up telling that story at his retirement party, and it got a lot of laughs.
That's
So,
awesome. That's cool. Yeah, you guys got any questions for the chief?
I just had one last question going back to what we were talking about earlier, the show that we had before with Joey Miller. You said he seemed evil. You said you could kind of tell like the guy was a little off. Has there been anyone else you've seen in like 30 plus years that you've looked at and like, we got to get this guy in jail, or you've seen something in someone where it just kind of chilled
Like a
you?
gut feeling? Or
Yeah,
something?
like one of those gut feelings as a cop, which I'm sure you guys get 90% of the time.
For about 5-6 years of my career as a detective, I investigate child abuse cases. And if you run into, somebody who will have sex with a child, you're running into evil. And I've seen it plenty of times. I've met people that
And just like,
you just felt it.
You can feel it, yeah.
You just feel it. And had the same feeling with Joey. I just felt like I was in the presence of something bad. And yeah, I have felt that before, unfortunately. But
dang, tough job.
Yeah, for sure.
you know what, though? It is a tough job, but it's a rewarding job because, you have to have people that are willing to do it so you can put the people in where they need to be, or try and get some semblance of justice. And I don't think that, we're ever going to arrest our way out of all the problems that we have in society. And I'm all into diversion programs and different things to try and get people where they need to be. We're very fortunate, going back to the county commissioners in Dauphin County, to have a mental health diversionary program. And our police department was one of the first police departments to put an embedded mental health co-responder in with our officers. We have a mental health worker that rides with our police officers. And that should have been done 100 years ago.
Sure.
It has been such a great program, and I'm very grateful to those that help us fund this program, because, there have been many times over my career looking back where I couldn't, put the round hole in a square peg. It just, you were left with very few tools in your tool belt, and your only option to protect society was to arrest somebody to get them off the street. But in your heart, you thought to yourself, well, this person's got other issues. Do they really need to be in jail? But you couldn't just ignore it, because if you did and somebody got hurt, there's liability for that. So, we owed it to society. We owed it to our police officers to provide other tools for them other avenues to try and get people where they need to be. And we're very blessed. We have a mental health co-responder. Her name's Devin. She came to us from probation, and she's got so many contacts. And, you know, if we deal with somebody that meets that scenario, you know, we can put them most times where they need to be and try and, you know, limit, you know, putting somebody in jail that doesn't belong to be in jail. So
Right.
Hmm.
I could talk all day long in the mental health co-responder program. I'm a very big advocate and a very big fan of that. And it helps me as a, you know, an administrator with de-escalation and all the different words that you hear in our profession, what we're trying to do, transparency. And, you know, most cops, you know, don't go out and start a shift and think I'm going to go out and try and shoot somebody or hurt somebody or do something that gets me sued so I can go to jail. I can lose my pride, you know, and lose everything. Who does that? And, you know, most cops want to get through a shift and go home to their families and try and make some kind of positive impact. And we're getting better as a profession in doing it the right way. Not that we did it the wrong way years ago. It's just times have changed and we expect more and we deserve more. And I think we're doing a better job.
That's awesome.
I couldn't agree more.
Cool. So do you have any other questions? Or?
No, after that, man, this has been fantastic.
Yeah, no. Chief Darrell, we definitely appreciate you coming in. It was cool to get that info on Joey Miller and everything else. Like, I really enjoyed that. It's cool to sit back and listen to somebody talk that actually has been in all this and been around it. A lot of times you read stuff online and you get your sources and stuff, but to actually hear from somebody that was there was very interesting. We appreciate it.
No, you're very welcome.
Yes, thank you, Chief.
Yeah, Chief, thanks so much, man. And hey, everybody out there, don't forget, support your police.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one thing we always want to stress on here.
They are here. They are here for you.
Yep. So thanks again, and I guess that's it for now. I'm not sure what we'll be back with next week. Possibly, actually, I think we do know the hijacking.
Oh,
We were talking about maybe doing that one, so that'd be an interesting one. A FedEx plane got hijacked back in the 90s.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember hearing about that?
I do not.
Yeah.
Man, he was busy catching.
That's true. He
Joey
was-
Miller
Yeah.
Wait, did you guys hear about the gold heist?
No, what's that?
Somebody just
out of Denver.
like 15 million.
Yeah.
What, current, like recently?
Yeah, it was like the Lufthansa thing from Goodfellas. I guess somebody snuck in that had put on like the orange vest and did like the thing and got the plane in and
Diverted the gold.
yeah, $15 million worth, and they don't know where it just disappeared.
Check your local internet.
Did you hear what happened in New Jersey today?
No, what
Just
happened?
ended on that, but this girl was pumping gas, and somebody called her on her cell phone, and her arm caught on fire.
No way.
So she's waving her arm around, frantically running around, and the cops showed up, and they shot her.
No way.
Jesus.
Yeah, she was waving a firearm.
I was like, whoa.
I was like, what? That's awesome.
Top shelf, Chief. Well done.
Top shelf.
You had
Top
us.
shelf.
You had us.
I had to end it on a cop joke.
I like it. I
That was
like
a good
it.
one. That's a good one.
Well, definitely, we'd love to have you back sometime. I think it'd be cool to talk. I'm sure you got a million more stories to tell, so we appreciate it. Don't forget to find us on Facebook, Instagram, at Old Dirty Basement, on TikTok, at Old Dirty Basement Podcast. I guess that's it for now, so we'll catch you where?
On the flip side,
If we don't see you sooner, we'll see you later.
peace. Thanks for hanging out in the Old Dirty Basement. If you dig our theme music like we do, check out the Tsunami Experiment. Find them on Facebook. Their music is available streaming on Spotify and Apple, and where great music is available.
You can find us at Old Dirty Basement on Facebook and Instagram, and at Old Dirty Basement Podcast on TikTok.
Peace.
We Audi 5000.